Have you ever wondered what German soldiers thought of both their allies and their enemies? Who was the enemy they feared the most, and which allies did they value the most? Next in this program, we are going to answer this series of questions. Starting with their main ally in World War II, the first thing we are going to analyze is the opinion that the Germans had of the Italian soldiers. The alliance between Germany and Italy was sealed on May 22, 1939, in what was known as the Pact of Steel. Officially, the Pact of Steel obliged Germany and Italy to help the other country both militarily and economically in case of war. The agreement was based on the assumption that a war would not occur within 3 years. The German attack on Poland on the 1st of September 1939 led France and Great Britain to declare war on Germany on the 3rd of September. At this time, Italy was still unprepared for the conflict and was unable to fulfill its obligations. Consequently, Italy did not enter World War II until June 1940, with a delayed invasion of southern France. Mussolini entered the war on that date, expecting Britain to surrender in the next few weeks, and when it ultimately did not, Italy was drawn into a war for which it was not prepared. With few exceptions, the Germans' opinion of the Italians was quite negative. To the Germans, the Italians were incomprehensible in their behavior because they seemed to always avoid combat. Commentaries on this issue convey much irritation. Some opinions reflected the following: the Italians are to die for. They contribute nothing at all and have no desire to wage war. They have no confidence in themselves and try to surrender as soon as they can. Furthermore, they are a bunch of cowards and chickens. The most negative opinions of the German soldiers continued as follows. 130,000 Italians are worth the same as perhaps 10,000 Germans. A white flag has been found on every Italian tank. If we imagine that the Italians were to attack southern Germany, it would be enough to defeat them with the girls of the Hitler Youth and the old men who are there. The Italians may be descendants of the Romans, but the Romans with their spears and shields would have contributed more to this war than they did. In this way, and in general terms, the Germans thought that the Italians were the worst soldiers in all of Europe. In fact, only a few Italian units were rated more positively, such as the Folgore Parachute Division. On the other hand, many German officers who had a very low opinion of the Italians claimed that if the Italians were placed under German command, the situation would improve considerably. In a minority of cases, it was also said that the problem of the Italian soldiers was their poor equipment and the poor food they received. As a matter of curiosity, there are opinions of British officers that agree with the German ones regarding the performance of Italian soldiers in World War II. The next ally we are going to look at is one that goes largely unnoticed by the public, and that is Romania. Since Antonescu came to power in Romania in September 1940, he knew that the best defense his country would have against Stalin would be an alliance with Germany. Thus, on November 22, 1940, Antonescu visited Hitler to establish a friendship with him. During his visit, the German leader informed Antonescu of his intention to attack the Soviet Union. Finally, on June 12, 1941, just 10 days before the invasion of the Soviet Union, Antonescu declared that Germany could always count on Romania's support for the imminent attack they were going to launch against Stalin. From then on, Romania fought on Germany's side, contributing everything it had to the war. In total, Romania suffered almost 500,000 military casualties during World War II. Unfortunately for the Germans, when the Soviets entered Romania in August 1944, the Romanians ended up changing sides and had no choice but to ally themselves with Stalin. However, the Germans' opinion of the Romanians was very positive, and they defined them as very brave and committed soldiers. The next soldiers to be valued were the Spanish. Although Spain was not a formal ally of Germany as Italy or Romania were, it sent some 50,000 volunteers who fought within the German army. The unit was known as the 250th Infantry Division of the Wehrmacht. Integrated within the so-called Blue Division, the Spanish participated in many battles on the northeastern front, their most famous being the Battle of Krasny Bor. In this battle, which took place in February 1943, the Spanish managed to stop a Soviet army that outnumbered them 4 or 5 to 1 and also had numerous tanks. The Blue Division fought on the Eastern Front until it was finally withdrawn at the end of 1943. The Spanish were some of the most highly valued fighters by the Germans, and several high-ranking officers of the German army went so far as to say that the Spanish were very good and fearsome soldiers. The Germans valued the strong spirit of camaraderie and unity that the Spanish demonstrated. They commented that the internal cohesion of the Blue Division was remarkable and contributed to its effectiveness in combat. In February 1942, after the German defeat in front of Moscow, Francisco Franco went so far as to say publicly the following: "If the road to Berlin were opened, it would not be a division of Spanish volunteers that would go to Russia to fight, but rather 1,000,000 Spaniards who would offer themselves." Unfortunately for the Germans, who held the Spanish in such high regard, this promise was not kept. Another of the countries that was an ally of Germany during the Second World War was Hungary, which sent numerous divisions to fight against the Soviets. This alliance dates back to November 20th, 1940, when Hungary formalized its alliance with Germany by signing the Tripartite Pact. This pact committed Hungary to support Germany and its allies in the war. It is estimated that Hungary lost almost 300,000 soldiers in World War II, suffering its most dramatic moment at the end of 1944, when its capital was surrounded by the Soviets. Although the Germans did not have a bad opinion of the Hungarians, since they had already fought together in World War I, after seeing them fight in the 1940s on the Eastern Front, they commented that they were terrible soldiers who were useless. And finally, let's see how the Germans rated the Finnish soldiers who also fought alongside them against Stalin. Generally speaking, Finnish soldiers were highly respected by the Germans for their bravery, endurance, and combat skills, especially in the context of harsh winter conditions. This was because the Finns demonstrated their military prowess during the Winter War against the Soviet Union, earning the admiration of their future German ally. Furthermore, the Finns were renowned for their guerrilla tactics and their knowledge of the terrain, which allowed them to conduct effective military operations against numerically superior forces. Well, having analyzed the Germans' opinions of their allies, let's now see what they thought of their main enemies. Firstly, let's look at what they thought of the British, with whom they had gone to war after the invasion of Poland. It was the British Army that was most highly regarded, and the Germans considered the English to be very tough soldiers in combat. The Germans commented that the English were very similar to them, and that if you dressed an Englishman in a German uniform, you wouldn't notice the difference between the two. However, although they had a good opinion of the British soldiers, they did not respect the English generals in the same way. Field Marshal von Rundstedt commented that the British generals were very cautious and were unable to take advantage of any opportunity that presented itself to them on the battlefield. He also said that the English only advanced after having completely bombed the enemy's defensive lines, and that, in a certain way, they were stuck in the way of fighting from the First World War. On the other hand, the Germans' opinion of the Americans was quite negative. They generally attributed all American successes to their great industrial capacity, which gave them total superiority in weapons. Many German officers commented that the Americans were cowardly and petty, and that they had no idea what a hard and deprived war was really like. Colonel General von Arnim, who fought against the Americans in Tunisia, commented that the American soldiers ran away as soon as they were pushed even a little, and that they were men who lacked ideals. And finally, let us look at the opinion that the Germans had of the soldiers of the Red Army. Although at the beginning of the war, the Germans thought that the Soviet soldiers were primitive and backward, their opinion of them began to change after the first campaigns. Little by little, they began to appreciate the Soviet soldiers' willingness to sacrifice and the brutality that he displayed on the battlefield. They commented that the Russians fought like true fanatics and rarely let themselves be defeated. They even described them as soldiers who despised death and as warriors without a soul. So, what do you think? Do you consider these assessments fair? I'll read them in the comments box.